Brian Johnston is a former California Commissioner on Aging and is a well-known advocate for the elderly independent. He's a frequent spokesman on the threat of assisted suicide and has appeared on CNN, World News Tonight, McNeil-Lehrer News Hour, and many other programs. Mr. Johnston has served on the California Board of Examiners of Nursing Homes and on the Board of Directors of the National Legal Center for the Medically Dependent and Disabled.
Thank you, George, very much. George called me this week, and congratulations again to George.
Thank you, sir.
You make a great president. So George called me earlier this week and said, hey, we need you. Come on down. We're going to make this a pro-life event. So that's critically important. I've known George for years, and actually know many of you for years, and had my own stint with the SAC CRA, as well as the state party. And so I'm very proud of Tom as well. I'm going to try to pack a lot into a very small amount of time. I'm going to try to do something that's very difficult to do, and that is to be concise about why we're doing what we're doing. I'm going to talk about the right to life. I think it's important that people understand what it is. There's a lot of misunderstandings about what it is. So we need clarity. If we don't know what our goal is, we'll never get there. If you don't know what your destination is, any road will do. It's very important that we understand, if you're pro-life, if you believe in the right to life, you need to understand what this is. Because without that understanding, we cannot accomplish our goals. So I'm going to go over that. That's a lot in and of itself. And then I want to talk about some very specific policy issues that we're facing right now. I think it's significant. I've taken that oath as well. That's actually an old bio from an older book. But when I served as Commissioner on Aging, I took that oath as well. Not only to the Constitution of the United States of America, but to the California Constitution. You may not know this, but the right to life obviously comes from our founding document, the Declaration. But it actually appears in the California Constitution. In the First Amendment of the California Constitution is the right to life. But what is the right to life? One of the things that we have to focus on is that a right is a legal issue. This is a legal issue. Now, I'm going to go over 4 specific challenges that many pro-life folks face when they deal with the right to life, because they're not examining what it is, what was asserted in the Declaration, what in essence was lost. In 1973, with the Roe versus Wade decision, those of you in the pro-life movement know that has allowed for the killing of 1.5 million of unborn children each year. It's a huge tragedy. But the reason that's happening is that a legal right was suspended. The legal right to life was lost in 1973. And unless the right to life movement focuses on restoring that, knowing what it is, and restoring that, it's very easy to get drawn into other tangents. I want to spend a little time talking about some of the tangents that are very common for people to get pulled into. These are all good things. They're great things. But they're not our goal. And if you take a tangent, it's going to be very hard to get to your goal. Those of you familiar with geometry know that you take a tangent, and after a while, you're way off base. So the very first one, and you hear this very often, is that this is a women's issue. Now, women are awesome. That's why I married me one. Women are great. But you and I know this. Simple biology tells us that actually in every abortion, at least half of the time, there's a male child killed. We know this, that biologically speaking, there's a unique human being involved. That unique human being has heartbeat and brain waves, has a different blood type often than the mother, is dependent on that mother, and actually will be even after birth. Dependent on others after birth. But there's a unique human being there. And it's very important. I think part of the temptation is to try to frame it for our culture. Okay, yes, it's a woman's issue. Let's talk about how women are hurt by abortion. They are indeed. But if we frame it that way, you need to know that's how Roe versus Wade framed it. That was the entire premise of Justice Blackmun's decision, that this is essentially a woman's issue. If you frame it that way and do not give cognizance to that unique human being, then there's no reason to support the right to life. There's no reason to care. So it's very difficult if you think you're addressing the right to life and you want to get along with your friends and neighbors, with Joe Sixpack and Sally Soap Opera. If you think it's better to say, yeah, it's a women's issue, I agree. The problem is that you're missing the point of why this is a debate at all. Because it was Blackmun who ignored science. Justice Blackmun wrote the Roe versus Wade decision. And he ignored science to say, we just don't know when life begins. We have known when life begins since 1836, when Sir Thomas Berry witnessed mammalian conception with the modern microscope in 1836. He wrote a monograph on it. He was knighted. He was an Englishman who was knighted for doing that. There's no debate about when life begins. There's no debate. It's a scientific fact. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That's what our founders said. Those are the truths we just heard sworn to. Our freedoms are based on a very basic premise. And that is that government is just because it derives its authority from the human lives it governs. And to the degree that it protects those lives is the degree that it's a just government. That's the premise our founders built this nation on. That the government does not give you life. The government does not give you rights. Where have those rights come from? We hold these truths to be self-evident. We're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Now, thankfully our founders, knowing that most of them came from different colonies with different backgrounds, didn't say, from my Creator, from my personal theological God. No, just we have a Creator. It's a self-evident truth according to the laws of nature and of nature's God. So it's not according to our theology. That's the second and most common tangent that pro-life folks will tend to view the right to life. That somehow this is about my theology. And I know you've seen it. It's pretty common. The tendency to view this debate as about a personal theological debate. That somehow, because my religion is offended, abortion is wrong. No. My faith is offended. But it's not because my faith is offended that abortion is wrong. It's because this is self-evidentially a human life. Now, many of you have studied the developing child, and you know that the heart is beating. Often, I told you never to call me here. Okay,
It's me.
yeah. He does this all the time. The heart is beating as soon as 24 days after conception. Often the mother doesn't even know she's pregnant yet. It isn't because I believe the heart is beating. It isn't because my faith says that that's a beating heart. It's objectively a beating heart of a unique human being. That unique human being, we talked about the blood type, we talked about it can be half the time, it's a different gender even. That is a unique human being that biologically, science is telling us more every day. The Human Genome Project tells us that's a human being unique to human history. Genetically unique. That child may have siblings with similar genetic makeup. That particular child is unique to human history, has never before existed, and will never again exist, and will live or die whether or not it's allowed to by an abortionist. That's a unique human life being taken. It isn't because I believe. If I was to call Roger tomorrow, and I probably will call Roger tomorrow about something else, but if I was to call Roger tomorrow and say, you know what, Roger, that was great last night. It was all about the right to life. It was wonderful, but you know what? I've been thinking about it. And as I think about it, you know what? I gotta tell you, I've changed my mind. Roger, I've changed my mind. I don't believe we should be oppressing women like this. Roger, I think we're just we're the American Taliban, Roger. That's what we are. We're pushing our religion. I just don't believe we should do this anymore. Well, you know what Roger would say. I'll tell you the polite part.
Hurt your feelings.
That's right. I'll tell you the polite thing Roger would say. He would say, Brian, I don't care what you believe. He would say, Brian, this has nothing to do with what you believe. So, it isn't just that tomorrow it has nothing to do with what I believe. This really has nothing to do with what I believe right now. It isn't about my faith. Those of you who know me know that, yes, I have faith. Pretty strong convictions. I'll be glad to talk theology some other time. But this is not a debate about my faith or your faith or anybody else's faith. When we allow that to be the case, we are putting up a barrier to our fellow citizens. We're preventing them from understanding what this debate's really about. And it's critical that we not allow that to happen. I got to tell you, it's essential that we not allow that to happen. Now, my faith motivates me. Our faith is a motivation. I know it's George's motivation.
Yes, sir.
But there's a difference between our motivation and our corporate destination. I work with people of all faiths and people of no faith that just have common sense, that see self-evident truths. And it's important that we be able to do that. So it's critically important. That's the second hurdle. It's very common. I have to tell you the number of times I've talked to people of great faith, and they incorporate that as being the premise. And I see people, wait a second, well, I'm not Catholic. I don't need to go to an altar call to be pro-life.
He's still in there.
And so, I think I'm in frame, right?
Oh yeah, don't go past this.
Don't go past that. Okay. So, one of the things that it's important, I know this, I work with a lot of Mormon folks, I know this, that if you went to a pro-life rally and a Mormon individual is speaking, then they tell you, and you know, we have to do this because Joseph Smith has instructed us to do it. Many people would hesitate. Well, wait, that's not the reason we're here. But I have to tell you, I've been to many other pro-life groups where I have heard very sectarian presentations as being the premise of what we're about. That's not the premise of why we're here. That is not what the right to life is about. It's about a self-evident truth. Very, very important. The third hurdle, very common hurdle. I used to teach. I used to do a lot of things. I was being teased by George about my bias. That's a short one. And as Tom knows, the older you get, there's a lot of things that can be said about you. So it's not necessarily a compliment. You've had many offices is not always a compliment. But one of the things that I used to do is teach, and I'm a big fan of people understanding principles that we need to communicate effectively. One of the challenges I see, though, in our movement is that people have substituted that truth, that good thing, for being our purpose, for being our destination. There are groups, and there is a particular one I'm very impressed with, because I love classical education. And there's a group out of Gonzaga University, an excellent school. And what they say is we simply need to teach people to think Thomistically. That means after Thomas Aquinas. To think logically. If we can get them to think logically and go through and analyze, that they'll come to the self-evident truth. We just need to teach them that. And these basic premises, if we get them to think logically, and of course Thomas Aquinas borrowed from Aristotle. If you didn't know that, now you do. And so I'm a big fan of logical thinking. It's a great thing. It is important. But that's not our goal. It's a great tool. Learning is a tool. But it's still not our goal. Let me explain. Our goal is not merely to change people's opinions. Some people, we just need to change people's opinions. That's all we have to do. If that's the case, we've already won. You may not realize this, but Gallup every year does a poll on the abortion issue. And America every year is somewhat divided. We know that, how it's skewed. But do you know that in that poll, and it's been consistent over the last, 10 years, 15 years, approximately, last year was 23%. 23% of Americans want an absolute ban on every abortion, no exceptions. That's a small percentage, that's not a majority. 27% wanted abortion for any reason or no reason at all. Just get rid of the baby, kill the baby, shut up. No debate. 27%. But the vast majority of Americans, the vast majority, it's usually about 50% every year. They want to see some kind of restrictions on abortion. And you've heard the typical litany. It's the one you always hear from people who want to justify all abortions, and they give you the standard litany. Yeah, what about rape? What about incest? What about the life of the mother? What about severe fetal deformity? It's a litany that's given from that belief system. And you, if you study this, you know, you take all of those exceptions together, and it's less than 2% of the abortions that are done. And if you think about it, that position, and of course he was vilified, but there was a reason he took this position. That's George W. Bush's position. That's a pro-life position. You may say, no, he's got to be an absolutist. I have to tell you, you don't have to be an absolutist when you say, I want to save 97% of the babies that were killed today. I want laws that will save 97% of the babies that are killed today. I want those laws. That's pro-life. If I can save 97% of the babies and literally do it with the law, I'm going to do it. You'll hear in a little bit about parental notice. Parental notice doesn't ban abortions. It does put serious restrictions on abortion. It's a pro-life measure and has a great impact on limiting abortion. Our goal is to limit this evil through the law. The law is our tool. If we decide that the goal isn't the law, instead the goal is we just want to win people's hearts, the law, and this is a false assertion, you hear it a lot, you can't legislate morality. The law is morality. Jerry Brown is a very moral man. Jerry Brown is lecturing you about how you live your life, about the car you drive. Jerry Brown is internationally agitating as we speak to make sure that his government, one of the more massive state governments, is going to control how you live for moral reasons. Because you're causing global warming. He's a moralist. Literally every law is based on a moral premise. Please do not fall for the argument you can't legislate morality. Excuse me. That's what laws are. That's what they are. So we have to make sure that the laws we present are based on self-evident truths. I'll tell you this, that global warming isn't a self-evident truth. I've studied it. I won't go, this isn't about that, but I know that all the planets throughout, I used to study astronomy, any planet anywhere in the universe, the single greatest impact on that planet in terms of its temperature and weather is its star. Go ahead and study that. Ours is called the sun. Go ahead and study the fact that it is the sun's effect on our planet that has caused the ice ages over time to grow and to recede, grow and recede. There were no SUVs that caused those ice ages. It was the sun and the solar flares and solar activity. Our proximity to the sun is what allows us to have life on Earth. Why is this? It is actually important, the right to life, because the ideology of global warming wants to blame human lives. You're a problem. Overpopulation. There's too many human beings doing their thing on the earth. We need to control human lives. Human lives are to be controlled is one of the premises of the global warming debate. Human lives are a problem. The reality is that human lives are the only legitimate reason for any government to exist. That's what your founder said. Human lives, the value of a single human life, is the very premise for just government to exist. If you make this only about opinion, let's change people's opinions, you still not get to our goal. And let me explain why. Not only are the majority of Americans already pro-life, if you include people that have rape and incest exceptions, and include people on a total ban, that's 70-some-odd% of Americans already agree that we need to restrict abortion. But it's not being restricted, not in our state. Thankfully in Texas, in other states where they realize this is about the law, they are passing such laws. If you only make it about people's opinions, you actually reduce it to be an opinion. You reduce a situation I've heard many times in the legislature where talking to someone, one I can think of right off, an old friend of ours, Mr. Garamendi. Mr. Garamendi, who's from the Sacramento region and still is, he's come back to haunt us. Mr. Garamendi, on more than one occasion, because he was Catholic, said, you know, you need to know, Brian, I agree with you, personally. I'm personally against abortion.
But
They didn't even say but. It's just to him, it's just a personal thing. Well, I don't care. We don't elect you to indulge your personal feelings. This isn't about what you personally believe. If we allow people to reduce it to being an opinion and not about a legal right, the right to life is a legal question. If we do not bring it home to what this debate is about, we can get sucked into that tangent. Hey, well gosh, even Garamendi agrees with me. No, he doesn't. No, he does not. And you cannot allow it to be reduced to being about personal opinions. You cannot allow it to be about what I think. It's about what you think. You know? It's a feeling. I just feel it's wrong, you know. But I don't want to legislate morality. But I agree, I feel I'm uncomfortable with abortion personally. That's good that you are. That's why we need to change the law. So, while it's important, obviously opinion is important. This is about much more than opinion. And unless we understand that and are going towards that goal, we won't get there. This is about the law. And then finally, this is a tough one. People don't understand often when I frame this. It's very important to understand them. One of the most common substitutes for our goal that I have seen is a good thing. I've been involved in this. And if you're a Christian of any background, you should be involved. And that is crisis pregnancy centers. But you need to realize what they are. They're asocial. In crisis pregnancy centers, the reason I mentioned Christianity there, those of you who know what Jesus said, he said, I was naked and you clothed me, I was hungry and you fed me, I was thirsty and you gave me drink. These are young mothers and their children that are in immediate physical need. If you're a Christian, you have an obligation to them. Much more than the government does. Collectivist thinking says, oh, the government should take care of them. The government is the one that should do all that stuff. No, actually, if you look closely, we're the ones that need to do something. So I think it's important. I helped found the Crisis Pregnancy Center of Sonoma County. I've been on the board. I was on the board of the Life Center here in Sacramento. But you need to know something. That is called a work of corporal mercy in Christian theology. It doesn't lift a little finger to end the Holocaust. It doesn't change the law that's allowing the routine killing of children. And sadly, what happens, and this is sad that it's happened, people say, well, we just need an alternative to abortion. An alternative to, you mean abortion's a choice and this is another choice? No, I'm sorry. If that's your answer, if that's our goal, you don't understand what's going on. People would not say at Dachau or Treblinka, oh yeah, I just don't like those death camps. We just need to have alternatives, that's all. We just need to, if any of those Jews escape those trains, maybe we can help them. That's what we'll do. If they get off the train, we'll cater to we'll have bagels and lox or something. We like Jews. That's just something the governments do. We can't do anything about it. No. The law is what allowed that crime against humanity. It was the law that allowed that. And it's the law that was changed in 73. If we do not direct ourselves to the law and the legal right to life, you're not addressing the right to life. You're on one of those tangents. Those are all good things. I'm not condemning anybody who pursues those avenues. But unless we pursue our goals, we cannot get there. Now, George, I mentioned this to George. I said, George, that's why I'm speaking to your group. Because what you do here at the CRA is absolutely essential. It is absolutely essential. We're looking at 2016. The only way we're going to see change, and I know that's the reason you're in this room, is we must be involved in the civic process. The right to life is a battle for the civic process. That's what it is. Failure to recognize that is failure to understand the moment we're in. Now, the CRA is important because it's affirming the principles of the Republican Party. If you don't know this, the Republican Party has a strong pro-life plank. There's many Republicans that fail. You know them, I know them. But this party is an awesome party because of the principles it's built on. That goes back to Lincoln. Lincoln actually, another time we'll talk about the relationship of Lincoln to this moment. We don't have time for that now. But if you have friends that happen to be registered Democrats and say they're pro-life, I know some. It's not just foolhardy, it is antithetical, and particularly in California. The Democrat Party is 100% pro-death. Its platforms are 100% pro-death. 100%. On abortion, you already know about the funding of Planned Parenthood, about unlimited access to abortion anytime, any reason, just choice. And on assisted suicide. Assisted suicide, as you know, was just signed by Jerry Brown. Some people entertain the thoughts, well, you know, he was raised Catholic, he was a Jesuit student. Maybe that'll all come back to him. No, he is the leader of the Democrat Party of the state of California. And it was nice to entertain the idea that he might veto that, but it's part and parcel of the machinery of the Democrat Party. They are given to an ideology, to be honest, it's an ideology of death. That human life derives its goodness from a collectivist government. Human life should be controlled by a collectivist worldview. That's antithetical to what America was built on and the principles that you just saw sworn to. The principles you saw sworn to are essential for our freedom. So the right to life is the backbone of what all of our freedoms are made of. My right to be secure in my person, papers, and property, a right I love, emanates from my right to be alive. Because the government derives its just powers from my life. It's supposed to be guarding my rights. Its just powers come from the fact that I've been given unalienable rights. My right to keep and bear arms, which I think is an excellent, excellent right, emanates from your right to be alive. That the government cannot take that from any, no one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The problem with this, the bill just signed by Jerry Brown, assisted suicide. Very fetching idea, as you know, and I have some books here, and if you want a copy of these books, give a donation because it's going to the SRA. And quickly you get a lot more in these books. But what Jerry Brown did is he basically made an emotional argument. His emotional argument is fetching initially because nobody likes suffering. And so what Jerry Brown said was, gosh, if I'm ever in the same circumstance as Brittany Maynard. Again, why was Brittany Maynard chosen? She was cute. Jack Kevorkian was not cute. Jack Kevorkian was a bad icon, a bad messenger for their ideology. They actually recruited Brittany Maynard. They recruited her. Jerry Brown said, if I was ever in that circumstance, I'd want to be free to commit suicide. Well, in his statement, he revealed he didn't even understand the law he was signing. Because in California, as in most other states, it isn't a crime to want to commit suicide. However, the authorities will get involved. It's called a 5150. You show that you may be a danger to yourselves or others. So yes, authorities will be involved. If Tom was to go to the top of the Board of Equalization building, which he might do sometime, in desperation, and threaten to jump, agents of the state will get involved. They will try to talk him, they'll lie to him if need be. A fireman, a policeman, whatever it takes. They will try to prevent him from freedom. And their goal is not to keep the sidewalks clean. Their goal is to prevent harm to a vulnerable member of society who is emotionally vulnerable. It's not a crime. What Brittany Maynard did wasn't a crime. This was the crime in California. What her husband did. Because what's the crime in California is facilitating, encouraging, or assisting in a suicide. That's the crime. And that is what he did. Because the desire for suicide is an emotional request. What's still a crime now, if somebody on the street sees Tom, says, "God, there's a guy up there, what's it?" This has happened. The crowd gathers when somebody says, "Jump!" That's a felony in the state of California. That's a felony. And I want that person going to jail. Human beings are vulnerable things. We're very vulnerable. We're precious, according to our founding documents. You don't have to be a Christian to believe that, according to our founding documents. We're about to, as George said, we're about to celebrate the birth of Christ. An amazing event. It affirms something very deep, if you're a Christian, but it sure affirms something that is even deeper than Christianity and is recognized in every culture. There is something special about human beings. They're incredible. Our nation is built on that premise, that every life has intrinsic worth and value that the government does not give it. If we cease to protect those vulnerable lives, if the law no longer does that, we will lose the most basic premise on which all of our other freedoms are built. I do have a petition here. If you haven't signed it, please sign it on assisted suicide. If you don't have some, they should be. I know every Catholic church is supposed to be distributing them. So that's supposed to be going on these next few weekends. But this isn't about Catholicism. This is about the most precious right in our society. Will vulnerable human beings be protected under the law? So thank you, George, and thank you for opportunity to speak.
Can you remind us